Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first podcast of February 21. So we have had a very fruitful first month of this year. We have done 4 podcasts, and we're starting with another one, the number 38, where we had the pleasure to have an amazing guest, one more very cool guest, which was Lucian Racovitan. I'm not sure about the pronunciation of the last name, but yeah. And Lucian was very nice to me. I know about him because a former friend of mine, I'm a friend from my university, worked at his studio in Romania. And this is how I got to know about him. And he was very kind, accepted the invitation to our podcast. And we had a very, very inspiring and very friendly chat with him. So to shorten up a little bit, what is so amazing about him is that so he studied for around a semester in Romania, and he understood that university wasn't the right one for him, so he moved to Ireland, where he completed a bachelor degree in architecture, and then he applied for Bjarke Ingels Group, and he got a job, and then he worked there for 10 years with a short parenthesis in Japan, where he worked for Kengo Kuma. But yeah, as we know, Japan has a lot of earthquakes, so he didn't find that experience very pleasant for him, and he came back to Copenhagen and worked there. And then he left, and he took part in an architectural competition where he got the second place, and this is how that was sort of the jump, the leap of faith to start his own office. And yeah, now he's back in Romania and he's doing visualizations with his team for the leading architectural companies in the world, as Bjarke Ingels, Kengo Kuma, and others. So I would suggest you to go into the description of the podcast to check his social media, his websites, because the work he and his team does, it's very, very amazing. So I suggest you to go check it out. But before we start the podcast, I want to remind you that we were thinking about how to avoid you to listen to this podcast if you don't want to, or to listen only what you want to listen. And as you know, we are also building a platform which we will launch this year with articles and more content about creativity and the different creative industries and our guests. So in the meanwhile, you can join and subscribe for our newsletter. So you can get an abstract every month from our podcast episodes, our guests, our content with the best of what we have learned, why you should listen to a certain episode. So if you want to know more about that, check the link in the description or the link in our social media channels, which are at TCI Podcast, and the Creative Insider on LinkedIn and Facebook. And yeah, join our newsletter to get the best of and to know which guest was on our podcast or what kind of podcast we did, if it wasn't an interview, and what was the best of. So yeah, I hope you will enjoy the number 38, and thank you very much for the support. Enjoy the conversation.
The whole world stops just like that.
Hello, Lucian. How are you doing?
Hey man, too bad. Thanks for having me at the Creative Insider podcast.
Thank you very much for accepting my invitation. As I was telling you in the pre-chit chat of the podcast, I found out about you and your company from my friend Matteo, who now works at your office, I guess. And I was very surprised because usually Romanian people go to work in Italy, and as I grew up in Italy, I know a lot of people from Romania. And then this was the first case where I was also a little bit, joking with Matteo because I said you're the first Italian going to Romania, probably. So it's cool. Thank you very much for accepting the invitation because your work that you do looks amazing, and it would be very interesting for me to discover your background. So for the people who don't know you a lot, you can shortly introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, and where you're from.
Yeah, so I'm Lucian, and we have a small office in Bucharest called the Bucharest Studio. And it happens that we're about 8 people now, but we're growing steadily. And of course, we have one Italian, which seems like a miracle. I don't know why, but yeah, I guess that's us.
And since when did you start this company? How old is the company?
We started in November 2018, and at the time we were in Copenhagen. Ovi and I were 2 partners in the company. And I think we were there for a year almost, and then we moved to Bucharest because of certain reasons. And yeah, since then we grew a bit.
Well, I guess that those certain reasons are because in Copenhagen probably the life it's way more expensive than in Romania, or not only.
I mean, I wish that was the case, but I think in reality what happens is that personally I had some
Okay.
family things, yeah.
Okay.
So I needed to take care of those.
I understand. And but I'm curious to know your story since the beginning. So when in your life did you think that I guess you're educated as an architect. So when in your life you started wrapping your mind around the idea of becoming an architect and studying architecture, and how this idea grew into your mind?
Okay, that's a funny one because I think I never really decided to be an architect. It was more like I was 17, and then I wanted to be a cab driver. But at the time, I didn't really have a driving license, which I actually got really late in my life. But I think it was my older brother that was already studying architecture. So I said, I mean, why not? He's already setting the footsteps for me. And then I just jumped in the train and became an architect.
And how old is your older? Like, how many years older than you is your older brother?
He's actually about 5 years older than me. But I think that kind of, I mean, the reason that he started doing architecture set up a sort of philosophy for me, because I figured out that I can take the easy path in life somehow. If somebody just sets the footsteps for you, you can always jump in the train and just take a shortcut. So I think that became a bit of a philosophy, like a life philosophy for me. Because now when let's say if we're doing an image now in the office and within 15 minutes something doesn't look good, I think we didn't take the easy path. And I think we need to revision that and maybe spend the next 15 minutes changing the mood or changing the camera or doing something that would actually make the image look good in 15 minutes.
That's a cool philosophy. It's the first time I'm hearing here on the podcast. But when you started studying architecture, was your philosophy confirmed that taking architecture is the easy path, or was it rather different than you thought?
But actually, I think with architecture in school was more like I kind of hated it in some way because I went there thinking that it's about doing nice images and building some nice buildings. But then in the end, it became a lot of like theory and like physics and statics and how the buildings actually behave in an earthquake and stuff like that, which we do have in Romania, earthquakes. But yeah, I think I didn't really enjoy that part of it at all. And I was really good at the studio part, which is actually the part where you present the project. But then we had another 15 other curriculums that I hated.
Oh yeah, that's the same case for me because in Rome we have a lot of that physics and mathematics too, and then I tried to cheat on those by going in Erasmus here in Germany and and doing some other exams and explaining to my home university that this is math here. So it's a very common thing. But I'm curious, where did you study your, I don't know, you have a bachelor and master, I guess, and where did you study, and then how is the process to get into the university where you studied in, I guess, in Romania, or?
Yeah, I mean, I started in Romania, which was kind of I was 17 at the time when I not really started university, but I started preparing, because in Romania, before you actually start going to university itself, you need to prepare a bit, because the exam for entering the university, it's like almost 5 hours or 6 hours exam, where you go and you get an A0 paper, and you have a brief, and you need to draw for the next 6 hours this kind of, I don't know, this exam or like whatever brief. And then based on that, you get accepted at the university, and then you get a place within, if you get a place within the first 100, like if you get admitted between the first 100, then you don't have to pay for university. If you get admitted between the first 200, then you kind of need to pay for it. I mean, luckily enough, I was quite good at drawing, so I got between the first 10. But I think in general, this was when I was back at school, but it changed meanwhile. Now you don't really have that path anymore. I think now they would just evaluate your, I don't know, your exams in the last 10 years of school or something like that, and then they would just admit you based on that.
But if you say you managed to qualify within the first 10, you must have been kind of talented for drawings your whole life, or when did you discover this talent?
I mean, I never realized I was actually good at drawing. I mean, I went in these first 2 preparatory years before you go to university. I went and studied with some guy how to draw. And then, I don't know, I think when I got closer to the exam, he just mentioned that, hey, you shouldn't be worried about getting into university. But then when I went there to see where I was placed, like what kind of place I got in the university, it took me a while to find myself, because I never really looked up there in the first top places.
And what was the subject of your year when you were starting? What did you need to draw in that exam?
Yeah, that's funny, because I think you have about 3 exercises, or like whatever, that's what they call them in Romania. I don't know what they're called in English, but you have to draw 3 things. So one of the things, it's a perspective. And at this time, there was a perspective of a playground for kids. And then the second exercise was one of the famous buildings in Romania, I think was the circus, like the state circus. And the third exercise was a descriptive geometry exercise, where you need to intersect some shapes. I think was like some spheres and some cones, and you need to find some certain points. It's a bit more mathematical, I guess.
And how were the first months and first years in university? How were your grades there, and how did it develop?
It was a goddamn disaster. I mean, like I got in the first 10 in the university, and within the first year, I was one of the worst students. And my girlfriend at the time, she was a violinist. And then this was, I think, 2007, yeah. And I think this was the year where Romania actually joined the EU. And she managed to get an Erasmus kind of scholarship, or whatever it's called. And she flew to Ireland. And within the first months of living in Ireland, she wrote to me that I should come there, that it's nice, and I should come see her. So I went there to see her, and then she convinced me to go to the architectural school there and maybe present my portfolio. So I went there and then presented my portfolio. And then the guy said, you know what, tomorrow we're going on a school trip and you should join us. So I was there with like a luggage for 2 weeks, and I ended up staying there for 3 years.
That's funny. But did you need some certain also English certification to get admitted in their university there, or how did that work?
Yeah, like how the hell? Yeah, I think I didn't need anything. I mean, luckily enough, I think she was already at this time lecturing the daughters of, like, she was teaching the daughters of the director of school. She was teaching them some violin lessons. And I think already the guy was more like, when I went to this interview, he was already there. And then he was kind of like, I don't think he cared about all this stuff, because we kind of seemed the first Romanians to join EU, and then we seem motivated, and he was kind of happy to have motivated students around.
And so you just basically studied just a few months in Romania, and then you directly moved to Ireland, if I understood correctly.
No, it was more of a full year, and then I think the second year I went over.
But you didn't even complete your bachelor; you just went to Ireland.
No, I didn't complete my bachelor's in Romania. I couldn't. I mean, I had no chance whatsoever. It was too tough to study in Romania this time.
I understand the same. I felt the same for me in Italy, and that's why we had the Erasmus as an escape, and that worked for me. And I'm curious, how was the university in Ireland? Because so far I don't know anyone who have studied in Ireland. We have had people on the podcast from the UK, but never from Ireland. So how was the university there compared to your experience in Romania?
I mean, it was funny because I went to uni there, and then I was the only foreign student. Like, everybody else was Irish, and this was like really funny. And then all my classmates, they were dressed in tracksuits and some sneaks, and they didn't really have some sort of like an affinity for architecture. I think they were there for fun or some sort of reason. I don't know. And then slowly I got kind of accustomed to that. So at first I was taking it super serious, the school. But then I realized that it's actually a bit of a more relaxed environment than I was expecting. And we had only two things in the curriculum. We had studio, and besides that, we had some anthropology or something like that. And it was really easy somehow, because we were we were spending most of the time in studio, drawing and experimenting and having fun.
And how many years are the studies in Ireland?
It's 4+1. So you do 4 years of bachelor's, and then you do one of master's.
And in which city? You were in Dublin, or?
No, I wish I was in Dublin. I was in Cork. I mean, I'm joking. I wish I was in Dublin. I really loved Cork. It was like a small, almost countryside city in south of Ireland. It's about 300,000 people living there.
And did you have any cultural shock when you moved to Ireland compared to, I don't know, to your Romanian background, or how the people in Romania usually are compared to the Irish people?
I guess I had at the time, yeah. Especially that my English sucked at the time. So it was really hard to get on board. It was really hard. But then finally, I think the students and then my classmates, which are also like, some of them, they're now my best friends, let's say. I think they were really, really nice. I think Irish people in general, they're like the nicest people around. So I think that helped me a lot.
I didn't know that, because usually, I don't know a lot of Irish people, and I know only from, what I've heard online, that they get a lot into fights and stuff like that. So maybe it's.
I think that draws people together, these fights. I had this feeling that every time you went out and party, like if you went to a club, you had two options. You either get drunk and go home with a girl, or you get drunk and fight a guy. I think this is kind of a bit of the culture. And I think that kind of draws people together, because it's just more like, if you have a problem, you can stand for it in some way. I know it's bizarre to say that in a normal environment, but I think it's fun in Ireland.
And I'm curious, was your education there particularly focused on, I don't know, digital technologies, softwares, and topics like that? Because I guess then your further career, and now it's based on this your talent to create images, even by drawing, and now creating them with a software. So was your education very good towards this direction, or you were just yourself curious about how to use softwares for architecture?
I think it's mixed a bit. I think it's more like, you're pushed a bit by the teachers. If they see that you have a skill, then they would be helping you develop that skill. But generally, I don't think it's a very technological driven school, or at least it wasn't at the time. Maybe it's a bit more now. But I think most of my classmates, they would still draw by pencils and stuff at the time. But the reason that we had a lot of time in studio, we had so much time to experiment. I think that kind of left me with a lot of experimenting in softwares.
Before we go on with this topic, I missed a little bit the elephant in the corridor, so to say. You said that you moved from Romania to Ireland very quickly. How was like the life expenses in Ireland? How much did you need to pay of tuition, or did you get any scholarship, or did you need to work on the side? How did you manage to so quickly move from Romania to Ireland?
I think at the time, it wasn't like super expensive to live in Ireland. I think I could live with under €1,000 a month, and I would times I would just be helping one of the tutors as well to teach softwares and things like that, and I would get a bit of pocket money from that. And then I did some other small jobs on the side. And I think when I was just dragged into towards mod, my parents would also help me.
I see. And which software did you started to learn and to experiment with in the beginning? What was your focus on in the beginning?
I think in the very beginning we used, I used 3ds Max in school, and I was rendering in V-Ray. But then soon after graduation, I moved to, immediately after graduation, I moved to Copenhagen to work for BIG, Bjarke Ingels Group, where I spent the next 10 years of my life. And there I switched from 3ds Max into Rhino because everybody was using Rhino, and because it's a more versatile software when it comes to 3D geometry and modeling and stuff like that. It's not as strong when it comes to loads of geometry. Like it cannot take a lot of polygons as Max does. But as a modeling software, it's more versatile.
And but did you move to Copenhagen as soon as you were finished with your masters or bachelors? When did you move? Was that your first job actually after university?
Yeah. So the thing is that I did a small break between my bachelor's and my master's, where I went. So I finished my bachelor's, and then I moved to Copenhagen for 6 months. And while I was in Copenhagen, one of my best friends there, he was Japanese from Tokyo, and he used to work for Kengo Kuma. And then he was like, "Hey, dude, what about you go to Tokyo as well to experiment a bit of the culture, because it's really nice." And I was like, "Yeah, fuck it, why not? Let's go to Tokyo." So I went to Tokyo. This was March 2011. And then I rented the house for the next 6 months. I signed the contract and all that. I signed the contract with the office with Kengo Kuma. And then within a week, there was the biggest earthquake they've ever experienced. It was like a 9.1 magnitude, where the whole island shifted like half a meter sideways. And that kind of made me shit my pants and pack my stuff and leave the day after the earthquake. And lucky enough, my dad at the time, he was living in Sardinia. So I went over to Sardinia and spent some months there, and then relaxing and taking it easy after this life-threatening experience. And then while I was there, already the guys from Copenhagen, from Bjarke Ingels Group, then they were writing, "Hey man, you didn't finish this render. Can you send it to me?" This was just maybe 1 week after I left BIG, and I was in Tokyo already. But then I was like, "Yeah, I didn't finish it because I moved to Tokyo." And then the guy's like, "Wow, what the fuck? Why did you move there? When you're done with Tokyo, you should come back." So after Sardinia, I wrote back to the guys saying that, "Oh yeah, now I'm done with Tokyo. Do you still have some stuff happening there?" So they were like, "Yeah, of course, just come back, and then we'd love to have you on board." So I went back to Copenhagen, where I spent the next 3.5 years. This was almost a sum of almost 5 years with breaks at BIG. And then after that, I went to finish my master's, which was 2014, between 2014 to 2015. And after 2015, when I was done with my master's, I went back to BIG until 2018. November, almost 2019.
So you went from Ireland to Denmark, and then from Denmark to Tokyo, from Tokyo to Sardinia, and from Sardinia back to Copenhagen.
Yeah, something like that.
And were you surprised that you got the first time the job at Big? Like, how did you apply? Was it a lot of... because when you explain these things, I really much like your style, because you sort of take it for granted that things going to happen. Like, let's move to Ireland, let's move to Copenhagen, let's move to Tokyo. So it's really cool that you're so, like, I don't know, take it lightly and a positive way. So I'm curious, did you actually also, like, more carelessly send your first application for Big, or were you very much into joining that office? How did that happen?
I think it's a bit of a mix. I mean, I always liked Big when I was in uni, and I thought it was like the only office where I wanted to work. And then after graduating, after getting my bachelor's, I was sitting around with my brother, and then he was like, you should apply for a job now. It would be fun to work before you do your master's. And I was like very skeptical about it. I was like, I'm not sure if I'm good enough to get a job. I'm not sure if anybody would accept me. And he was, dude, he was like, just relax. Like, I mean, just get your portfolio, send it somewhere, and for sure you're going to get a job. So he really convinced me to send the portfolio to Big. And then I sent the portfolio, and within 2 hours, the guys were writing back, hey, are you available tomorrow? And I said, I just need maybe a week to pack my stuff, and I'm coming over. And I guess that's almost like my second philosophy in life, that you cannot really do everything. I mean, you cannot do anything alone. It's always like a teamwork. And I think the way we run the office now, it's a bit like that. It's more like a teamwork. Like, nobody has the skills to do everything. Each of us has like certain skills, and then we contribute wherever we can with it.
Yeah, and it's a little bit the butterfly effect, because if you wouldn't have sent your portfolio, maybe your life would have been totally different. But I'm curious. Did you have so, like, if you have somewhere online this first portfolio you sent to Big, it would be curious to send me a link of it, so that I can put it in the description of the podcast, and the listeners can see, like.
I think I have it. I think I can dig it from somewhere. And it's funny because it's not really a portfolio. It was more like I took 15 renders from school, and then I just collaged them together, and then I send it over.
But I think that there is this misconception that you need really a portfolio, because, for example, for my first job, for most of the jobs I have gotten so far, I have taken just my layouts for the university exams, for the university presentations, because if you do them pretty good during your semester, it's actually a proof that you can do a project, and you don't have to re-put it together into a portfolio. You could just send your layouts, and that's your portfolio. So that's cool. But yeah,
I guess it's like that. I mean, I was in my long experience at Big, I was at points also like responsible for reviewing portfolios, and I think at times there would be like 500 portfolios coming maybe in a week, or even more, 1,000 portfolios in a week. And then you'd have to review that so fast. You wouldn't have time to really read much about it. You just like flick through, and then you immediately can tell if somebody has the skills or not.
I see. I hope you didn't review mine, because I didn't get the job there.
Oh, fuck, man. I'm so sorry about that. That's a funny one.
Until when did you do this reviewing job?
No, it was just until you applied.
No. Tell me the year.
No, I can't remember for sure.
No bad feelings. If I didn't manage, maybe I didn't do a great job. And how was working at Big? Because as I said, I have applied sometimes, with a very low hope, and probably with not that big time investment as I should have done. And they always say, you have to be prepared for stressful hours and stressful conditions. So how was it for you working there? How was your whole experience?
I think I was lucky enough to be in there before all these things with the stressful conditions and stressful environment came into play. I don't even. I mean, I don't know. When I left, it wasn't that horrible at all. It was kind of fun because I mean, I spent most of my twenties in there, and I feel like it's because everybody, like not everybody, but half of the office was my age at the time. We were like half of the people. When I joined, we were 70, just so you get an idea. And when I left, we were 500. And when I joined, was more like 30 to 40 people. We were between 20s and 30s, including most of the partners now, and even Bjarke himself was like in his 30s, and was just like it was a fun environment. It was just like we would work, we would have like massive projects, and we would have deliverable like stuff to deliver. But then at the end of the day, we would just be like all of us hanging together, like going for dinner, going out partying, making out between each other's. Like today would be with one person from the office, the other day would be with somebody else. It was a fun place. It was more like this kind of a big family.
Did you have a lot to do with Bjorke himself, or he was already pretty busy going here and there?
I think it was crazy, but we do. I mean, we did travel quite a few times, not quite extensively actually. And then we were hanging. We went out several times. Like he didn't seem so. He seemed pretty down to earth at the time. And I think when I left, he was pretty much the same, just that he was a bit older and way busier.
I'm curious. I have had already people from Big on the podcast. Recently was Oliver Thomas on the podcast 30, number 30. He was he's currently the BIM and computational manager, one of the BIM computational experts in the office in New York. And I was asking him too about like if he knows if Bjorke himself is some like modeling genius or sketching genius, or he just have the ideas and his teammates implement them, because the ideas like the design ideas of that office are pretty remarkable and crazy in a good way. So that you have a long experience there. Was the office full of some architectural geniuses, or was Bjorke this very innovative guy? How did that work?
I think it's a mix. I think he's really visionary. He has like this very strong sense of, because he lived in Denmark, he has this really strong sense of community, and he really believes that people should do things together and they should hang out together. And I think that's the driving force of great work. I don't think great work can be done somewhere alone in the dark. I think great work, it's only done in great environments with great people.
I see, and that's really counterintuitive, because I don't know many Danish people, but they seems rather more reserved and shy than very community oriented.
Yeah, I think that's the misconception about Nordic countries in general, that they're just sitting there in the dark winter days and they're all pale and they hate people. But in reality, it's just like Denmark is like the nicest place to live. It's like everybody's like just so happy and then welcoming, and they have this super social life. And I think it's rooted in their ideology of life that started like 100 years ago with a guy called Jente that set up a set of rules of how people should live.
That's interesting and sounds very Scandinavian to set up like life rules. But I had the opportunity to meet some Danish people here in Germany also when I was a student, and I noticed that the difference of their personas, it's so big when they're like drunk and sober.
But isn't that available for everybody? Like I think alcohol helped me really become a normal person. Because when I was young, I was like super introvert and stuff, and then with a bit of alcohol, I managed to get out of my shell.
Well, I don't know, but there was a more common, like if I'm generally very funny and positive, and if I get drunk, that gets like even more, I get more like fun and loving, and I don't know. But for them, we're like, to me, personally, it felt like when they were sober, there was one person, and then when they get drunk, the completely opposite person was suddenly
Maybe living in Germany fucked them up.
Maybe I don't know, but I was.
I'm joking. I'm joking.
I'm curious. I'm curious to go visit Denmark as soon as possible. First as a
Please
tour.
do. It's a really nice place, and also Germany. It's a really nice place. My brother, he's been living there for like 6 years or so, and I was going to Berlin quite extensively, and it's one of my favorite places whatsoever. My ex-girlfriend was German, and I really like Germany in general.
Yeah, there are a lot of on this podcast. I've talked many times about like the misconceptions of Germany and how actually actually I've heard from another author. I think he's called Mark Manson. He wrote a book that's called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, and also like he has a blog where he writes articles weekly, and he has lived in many countries, and he says like the best part of a country is also the worst part of a country, because for example I've lived in Italy where people are very taking it easy and being chill and very friendly and very warm, but that's always like if you need to do even something serious or work can be the same thing, and then it gets a little annoying. And in Germany people are super precise, but also when you're supposed to take it easy and have fun, they still keep it a little bit more organized and precise, and that's like so you cannot have it all never nowhere.
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
did you have any cultural shock when you moved to Denmark in the beginning, or not shock?
No, I think by this time I already had a identity erasal. I mean, I didn't really feel like I belong anywhere after I graduated. So it was not in the sense that I was lost, but in the sense that I felt like we're kind of the same everywhere. Like it's the same people are living; they're just populating different places on Earth, and then we just set some sort of like economical and paranoidal boundaries. But besides that, we're all the same everywhere. So at this time, when I moved to Denmark, I had this idea of, okay, we're the same. It doesn't really matter where you are. It was more of a language barrier because I mean, Danish in general is like the most fucked up language you can find.
And did you manage to learn some Danish, or?
Yeah, I did. I did learn some Danish.
That's nice. And did you talk in the office in English or in Danish?
No, we talk mainly English because it's very mixed. The office, it's very cosmopolitan.
I see. And was it there where you really leveled up your skills into archivist and CG architecture? What were your tasks? Were you more a designer, or were you more into the graphics and representation of a project?
I mean, over a period of 10 years, it changed quite a bit. It started I think in the beginning, I was hired for ArcViz, and then I did that for quite some time. And then I became a project lead where I had to lead basically a team that was between 3 and 20 people. And then slowly I became better and better in doing projects. And then by the end, I was mainly like a PM, like a project manager, where I would just get a team and then we would just do a project from concept to detailed design and hand it to the client. So I would do the presentations with clients and all that. I was basically responsible for delivering a project
From the beginning to the end. And did you have any
Yes.
partner in charge, or Bjarke himself that did give you some guidance?
Yeah, I mean, the way the office works, there's always like a partner in charge, and then there's the Bjarke that has kind of the final word. But in reality, when you've been there for so long, you don't really like the partners. They just take care that maybe the guys that are a bit fresher in the office, they get a bit of guidance, and then when you're after 10 years, nobody really looks after your shoulder and oversees the project. You're mainly responsible for it.
And are really, really like these computational design geniuses and freaks, or you just have some people that implement those ideas when you have some crazy shape or some crazy form in your mind?
I think again, it's a really good mix. It's like there's a bunch of really smart people in the office, and then there's also a big team, and there's also like I don't know time for it. So I think you have all the ingredients to make a nice project in there.
And I'm curious, You said you've been working there for 10 years. And at what point after 10 years, which is to me a very long time, and you were leading projects in like one of top of the league offices, not only in Denmark but in the world currently. I could say also in the best office of our times, because Bjarke Ingels maybe is one of the architects that shifted architecture, as back in the days Le Corbusier did, and then OMA, and now BIG. What made you think, okay, I don't want to work anymore there, I want to go and start my company? Or how did you take that step in your life?
Yeah, actually, I never really had a deep thinking on it whatsoever. But I guess it's the fact that I needed to be closer to my family in a way. Like my family was getting older, like my parents, and then of course with age there comes problems as well. So slowly I was thinking like, how can I shift closer to them, or like at least to Romania? And then I think it was more of a need rather than a conscious decision. It was more like I need to kind of slowly get closer to the roots.
And was it for you hard to go back to Romania after so many years abroad, or were you happy? Because sometimes because for me it's a little different. You left Romania when you were young, but you still have had your childhood there and your teenage years. I moved with my family when I was 8, and came back to Bulgaria sporadically. And now for me, it's really hard to wrap my mind around the possibility to go back to Bulgaria for many reasons. So how did you feel uncomfortable in the beginning, or were you happy and relieved to go back?
No, I think coming back was fun. I mean, you kind of switch from one language to the other quite fast. And I think Romanian language, even though it's like rather poor in terms of words, there's very little words. There's a certain nuances of the language that I knew very well. And I think certain things, they're really fun in your own language. And I think this thing with language, I don't know if of course, it's not like the prettiest city in the world. It's like, there's a bit of dirt still going on. There's a bit of derelict buildings. The government's a bit corrupt. But overall, I feel like it's much, much, much better than when I left. And then people in general, they're also like pretty nice. I don't see any bad part in living in Romania. I see like also the weather. It's nice and it's warm and all that. And I don't know. It's comfortable living here. And this thing that you can get very close. I mean, you can get insanely close to a person just by not having nuances in the language. Not having boundaries in the way you speak to a person. It's beautiful.
And your partner, sorry, you have to excuse me, I forgot his name. He was also in Copenhagen with you, or he was already back in Romania and you were just friends?
No, we were really good friends in Copenhagen. He also worked at BIG. His name is Ovidiu. And then we both moved to Romania together. And now, as we're growing a bit, we're also looking into making new partners and stuff. So I think sooner or later we're going to have to do that because, again, I don't believe in this kind of hierarchical environment where you just sit at the top and you're some sort of like a boss. But I believe more in a co-op, in like a cooperational system where everybody gets like, in the end, everybody gets almost equal shares. And then we kind of make sure that everything happens properly.
That's a nice philosophy. And so you went back to Romania, and then did you have already planned how to start the business, or you first take a little bit of time off and then you start planning things, or how did the transition?
We had the company in Copenhagen, and we already had a few collaborators there and the people we were working with. And then when we moved back, we kind of slowly we got a bit more help from a few guys like Valentin and Mircea. They were like the first ones to join. Last night we celebrated Valentin's first year. So yeah, I guess that's how it all happened. We moved to Romania, and then slowly we started getting a bit of help. And now we have Valentin and Mircea, we have Ioana, we have Mihai, we have Alex, we have Ovidiu, we have myself and Matteo.
And when you started your company in Copenhagen, so you were just the two of you guys in the beginning?
Yeah, it was Ovidiu and I,
And
kind of in the office. But then we had few people helping us remotely.
so remotely from where? From another region of the world, or?
No, they were both in Copenhagen. It was, they were both the guys were in Copenhagen.
So how the whole? So you guys quit at Big and said we're starting an office. Did you get an office space? Did you had already computers, softwares? How was the process in the starting up your own company?
We didn't really think about doing visuals at first. I think it was just me alone when I left the office, and then I started. I just bought a computer, and then I did an architectural competition with a bit of help from few friends. It was a kindergarten in Iceland, and I had no idea that I'm going to qualify for anything. Or I just submitted the project, and then I just hoped. And then maybe a month later, I get a phone call from the guy saying that we got a second place for the competition, which was actually quite a nice prize to get. And it was also like a good sum that would actually help us start the office. And then with that, we slowly moved forward.
So you started as an architectural office, actually.
Yeah.
It would be curious to see this project too. So if you have any information online, we can then link it also so that the people can go check these different phases of your creative life, so to say. And
yeah, for sure.
And from there on, did you get some other projects, or how did it develop from architecture to architectural visualization?
I think while I was doing this competition, I had few friends in different offices. So I had few friends in Jan Gale's office, someone at Big, then there was like people at Kengo Kuma. Then slowly, like I don't know, people were just asking if I can help with renders. And then I was like, at first I was like, yeah, I just take one, or I take two, or I take five, and then slowly it just became so many renders that I had no way I could do them myself. And then that's why we asked a few people if they want to join the office and help us do this stuff together.
I was wondering, because you switched from being a project manager, which I don't know how it works at Big or in Copenhagen in general in the architectural field. Here in Germany, the project manager is not actually so much involved into designing. He's more the coordinator and the whole organizational part. When you did this job for a few years, was it the same for you? And how did you, if it was, how did you manage not to let your skills into 3D modeling and rendering fade, so to say, in time?
I mean, Big, like other offices, is just, it has a bit of a organic structure. So I don't think I don't think there's like a really set structure per se. It's more like, okay, there's project managers, there's project leads, there's interns, there's all sorts of things. But in reality, the roles are very organic. So you can be involved in anything you want pretty much as a project manager or as an intern. You could have an intern leading a team of 20, or you could have a project manager just sitting around and doing nothing and being paid and everybody hates him. So I guess my role was more like on paper as a project manager, but in reality I was more responsible for, I would at times draw diagrams in Rhino or help with some details of the facade, or figure out with the facade team where the gas pipe can go, or stuff like that. It's very organic. It's not really set in that respect.
I see. And what I was also wondering is, before you took the leap to go on your own, did you have prepared yourself some savings for a certain amount of time that you thought, okay, now I can quit and have some economical safety, so to say, or you were quite comfortable because I guess after 10 years it would have been easier for you to eventually go back to big?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I had so many backups. Like I could always just go back to big. I did have some savings, and then it's also like the Danish government that would, like, if you get in misery, it can help you out, like the social security or like the social welfare. And then I could also, like, I mean, if I would, my parents are always there. Like, so if I would just be in a deep shit, I think they would help me out. So in that way, I would never want to rely on my parents. I mean, I left Romania when I was 19, and I didn't really ask them for anything, just with a few exceptions when I was really deep in shit. But in general, I did have some certain backups.
I see. But from what you're telling me, it feels like really Copenhagen was is for many reasons this architectural design hub and design hub, because first you have a lot of offices which are high-end offices on a world level, and then you have this good structure, I guess, educational and welfare structure, so that people get more innovative, and then probably the low level of corruption in the country gets also, the fairness if there is a competition that the certain talented office gonna win it, and so on. So this is my interpretation currently of Copenhagen. And I think that city is really ahead also in terms of urban design. And you mentioned Gale Architects, which for me, Jan Gale, it's a very pioneer in this sense of design the city. So it's really interesting. And why didn't you try also to do? Did you try? I don't know. Did you try to do some architectural projects in Romania as well? Or have you any experience in this?
Actually, I do have experience. I mean, in reality, I'm just a certified architect. I have a stamp here. So I'm like, the title of architect in Romania, it's protected. So once you graduate, you have to work for 2 years under some apprentice. And then after that, you get a stamp so you can actually do your own projects. I didn't do all this because I graduated in Ireland, but then I went to Copenhagen and I did my apprentice in that respect in Copenhagen. And then I came back here for I had an interview here with the Order of Architects, that's what it's called here. It's a kind of the union. And then after that, I got a stamp so I can stamp it. But I wasn't really involved in any architectural project besides my mom's renovation, like her house renovation and stuff like that. But I don't think I have the patience to wait for 10 years for a project to be developed, or like even 5 years or 2 years. Our deadlines now in the office, they're about 2 weeks. So we get a project and within 2 weeks we need to hand in, regardless of how big or how small the project. And I think I like this kind of pace, that you don't, and also the fact that you don't really get attached to one idea that can be slaughtered one day by an economical issue, or I don't know, engineering revision, or downside of a client or stuff like that. In our case, we get attached to every project because it's so short, but we don't really get that feeling of giving birth to a baby, in this case a project, like an architectural project.
Well, I don't want to ask you about client acquisition, because from what I understood, because of your connection and your talent, you get tasks from this. I saw on your Instagram that you have a lot of, and on your website that you have done some of the coolest renderings for for many projects that people might know if they're in the architectural field. But what is your workflow today in your office? Generally, how it works? The whole process. Like, let's say I am a office. I come to you and I say I want to get an image from you guys. How this will start the whole workflow?
Yeah, so we get most of the projects from Messenger, like Facebook and stuff like that. It's like most of the guys we get projects from, it's people we know. And then they'd be writing, hey, we get this new project, and then would you guys be available to do this kind of work? And they would be, yeah, if we have time. In reality, we don't have a lot of time. In reality, we could be a team of 20 now or even more, but we just sometimes don't take projects because we need to recover, or sometimes we don't take projects because we don't have time, and so on. And then the project gets in-house, and then we all look at it, we save it on the server, we all get together, or we just, each of us sits at their own computer, and then we all look at the project and see, mainly it's like a PDF describing everything, like the views and then the materials and stuff like that. And then we all look through the PDF, and then we choose the views. Somehow, let's say maybe somebody doesn't, like Matteo doesn't, lately he doesn't want to do areas anymore. So we try to not give him any more areas because he's sick of them. So then we share the views between each of us, and then we either get a strategy of how we do this, like maybe some of us clean the Rhino file, because most of the projects come in Rhino format. So some of us clean the Rhino files, some of us prepare the site, and then once we have kind of like a clean, decent file that we can all use, we just put it in Max, and then we start populating it. So if two views are rather similar, maybe that forms a team where the team just sits there and then just does these two views. And if there are like 10 views that are similar, maybe that small team does the 10 views. And if there's like 6 areas, maybe there becomes a team that does the areas, stuff like that. And if there's like an animation, so once we're done with, if we have 16 views, let's say, and an animation, we do the 16 views. And once we're done with that, we start on the animation, because the animation is basically the result of the renders.
And if you have 16 views or in an animation, is that the 2-week project, or how long it takes to you to finalize such a project?
Yeah, I mean, that's why I said 16 in an animation, because that's the project we just handed in Friday. So it was a 16 view and a 3-minute animation. And we did the views in a week. And then once we were done with the views, we did the animation in a week.
Okay, that sounds very productive. Do you ever guys do late nights and weekends, or you try not to? How does that work?
I mean, in theory, we're trying to get rid of that. We're trying to become better and then make sure that we have some life as well. But I think because not everybody has the same level of skills as we speak, because like some of us, they're a bit more new and then they're like on a learning curve, we still end up working quite late sometimes and at the weekends. But I think if we would all be at the same level now, we wouldn't have to do that.
I see. Well, and because from now on, the people who listen to this podcast have heard a lot of times the names of the softwares, which are Rhino, 3ds Max, and always say we don't sponsor that softwares. It's just about the workflow. You mentioned you clean the file. What this process looks like?
I mean, the process is more like you maybe sometimes get a file, like a Rhino file that has double surfaces. It's about 2 gigabytes of file. It's super heavy, hard to work in. A lot of areas that you wouldn't see in the renders, certain details that you won't see in the renders. Maybe there's like handles on the doors, but you're just doing aerial views, or maybe there's like toilets that are super detailed, but you're doing a aerial view. And things like that, So you clean mainly, like you clean the file, so you mainly be able to work with, and it fits your kind of views.
So generally, because you have a knowledge of how people use Rhino also in the architectural office, because you have worked at BIG, do really they use all these objects, 3D handles and toilets, because they directly want to obtain the drawing in Rhino, or not everybody does that like that? Because my personal
not everybody does that. No, it's a bit exaggerated. Not everybody does that. In general, like if we work with like Engoku, Masnoheta, OMA, BIG, all the big firms, they're actually under-designed, the objects. They don't have detail. So then cleaning, meaning adding detail to it, They'll just give you a lot of times just like massings if there's a master plan and you need to add facades and detail and stuff like that you're going to see in your views. And yeah, it depends. cleaning, it's not like one fits all process, but it's rather adapting to certain situation.
I see. And how about the post production? Do you have a lot of post production work, or what side softwares do you use for all the animation, for example? Because I've seen recently you have done some animation for some project from BIG, like some islands or something. And I guess you have done also the animation for his projects in Japan for Toyota. I'm not sure here. And I see that, for example, graphics pops up in the beginning. Then what is this site post-production of softwares you use?
Yeah, so more recent. I mean, what we post online, it's maybe 2% of what we actually produce. But when it comes to softwares, we use Adobe Suite. Like we just use if we're doing these diagrams in the beginning, we use After Effects for them, and then Illustrator. So we illustrate everything. Like we take all the line drawing from Rhino, we illustrate it in Illustrator, and then we moved it into After Effects, and then we animate it. And then we do all the we put the whole movie together in Premiere, and then all the 3D job, all the rendering and stuff like that, it's all in 3ds Max.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I was curious because you have had this development in your career, which is very interesting, from applying to BIG by making your first portfolio collage. Then you have been evaluating portfolios in BIG. Then you have moved out as an architect, and now you work in the archivist industry. And I was wondering what does, because I know Matteo who works at your office, and he definitely have had to apply. What do you look in the portfolios when people apply at your office?
Yeah, I think with Matteo in general, he was a good friend of my partner Ovi. So I didn't even look at his portfolio. I think he's more like, yeah, he's just a good friend, and then we're just going to be working together. And I think in general, like we didn't really per se looked at portfolio like thinking that it's a really good portfolio, but it's more like we talked a bit with all our colleagues, and it was more important that we have a chemistry together, that we understand each other's. Because ideally, like all our colleagues, they would be there kind of not hating us, but also we would not hate them. So I think it's like these kind of good vibes, or like just making sure that we're not hating each other is like most important, rather than just super skills. Or because I mean, of course, imagine it's not like a utopian. It's more like we have a love-hate relationship. Like sometimes maybe somebody in the office hates me, or sometimes they hate Valentino, or sometimes they hate one other guy, or I hate somebody. But it's more like we have to do some, like sometimes we work under stress or like under tough deadlines, and then of course there's like if we fuck up, we just end up not hating each other, but more like we give up a bit on each other's. And but in general, yeah, I think it's more important that we do that we kind of get together and make sure that we have a good vibe rather than the skills themselves, because those anybody can develop. I think anybody today can do a good render under good guidance and stuff like that.
But what are the technical initial skills that you expect from somebody to be able to join your office?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I think if they know how to use 3ds Max and then either Corona or V-Ray and a bit of Photoshop, I think that's a good start.
Yeah, but using Corona, like using 3ds Max can be on the very different levels. Like I don't know, for example, I could model some chair, or I could model some walls, but that doesn't mean I can use 3ds Max. So from which level do you think it's do you think there is a certain amount of experience, like in time wise, that they need to have had with the software? Or
yeah, of course, I know where you're pointing. Of course, ideally everybody should be like super skilled and have been doing like 500 images before they join our office or help us. But that's never the case. That's never gonna happen. I mean, most of the times people join and when they're very basic, let's say.
I see. That's interesting. I'm questioning here because it would be fun to at some point maybe transition to the more archivist and graphic career. So, and I'm asking also for all the people that might be interested in this. Another thing that I'm curious about, if you can give me some overview. I don't want to know precise numbers or stuff like that, but how is like to work in an archivist industry in the archivist industry in Romania, in some Romanian office. The people who are employed, do they have like a wage that allows them a pretty comfortable life in Romania, or in general everywhere and around Europe compared to European standards? What could you tell me about this? Because I've had some guests from VIC, which is an office in Bulgaria, in Sofia, and they were saying like, yeah, well, if you live in Bulgaria, the wage is really good, and you have a very, so to say, chilled life outside of the office. But of course, you'll have to a little bit downsize if you go abroad.
I mean, yeah, it's funny enough, but I think some of the guys, they maybe earn more than I was earning after 10 years at Big, which is crazy enough. But yeah, I think nobody is underpaid, and nobody's ever going to be underpaid. And I don't know if it's like, I mean, for European standards, for sure, we have good deals. That's for sure. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, now it depends on everybody's needs and what everybody thinks it's good for themselves. But you can also ask Matteo. Huh?
Well, no, maybe at some point he'll participate in the podcast. Who knows? We can think about it. But it was curious for me to interview someone from Romania, because I feel this sort of camaraderie with Romania, because it's, you know, the whole border with Bulgaria, and we joined the EU at the same year, and sort of similar countries on the standards. So I was curious that I have this closeness to Romania, but in the meanwhile also, you know, I never been to Romania, or never talked with someone who lives there. So I was really curious about it.
Actually, like one of my good friends is also from Bulgaria, and he was considering coming to Romania to join us. But I cannot say his name because I'm not sure if he would want his name to be on the podcast or something. But yeah, if he listens to it, I salute him because he knows who he is.
Yeah, that's. I think that now Eastern Europe, starting from Bulgaria, Romania, and then Ukraine and Russia, and Poland, also Hungary. I know some offices. I don't know how it's in the Czech Republic. It's sort of this center for archivists. And do you think there is some certain reason for that, or? Yeah,
I think there's. I mean, most certainly it's because it's the same with any other subconsultant. So you have like let's say an architectural firm, and then they would subcontract other firms for doing certain jobs. And it's the same with like if you have like, I don't know, an IT company, or if you're like a construction company, or if you're like an airplane company, you subcontract a lot of the contracts in certain areas where in some way the wages are less higher than your own country, but in reality they're direct proportional to the living there. So I guess that's why Europe is standing so strong today. And then life here, it's one of the best in the world, if not one of the best life in the world. It's because we kind of manage that everybody gets a certain life standard.
Yeah, that's an interesting point of view, and I think, but it's also curious to me because the know-how and the technical skills actually in that area of the world has developed so much. Do you think that because let's say that archivist is in architecture in general is a pretty hard environment because you have these very close deadlines. Do you think that people there are more like open to be hustling and be working hard because it's I think this post-communist era in all the Eastern Europe has unlocked this possibility for people finally to be improving their lifestyle even further on, and they're now more ready to be suffering with extra hours and stuff like that, which maybe in Central Europe it's more like people are more like taking it more I don't want to say easy, but more like they have certain benefits like, I don't know, working hours and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, like I only have the two point of references. Actually, I have 3 point of references. I have the Tokyo experience, Copenhagen, and Romanian experience. And I think from these 3, I feel that Romania is the most fortunate. And I'm not sure if it's because we're doing ArchViz rather than architecture, but I think in Copenhagen, it was a bit more intense. We worked even more hours and more stressful. And again, now with working hours in Romania, I mean, at least in ArchViz, or at least in our office, it's because we're still developing. I mean, once we're going to get to a certain level of skills, I don't think we're going to be needing to stay that late anymore. And I think the stress level is not as dramatic as it is in architecture. But yeah, I mean, Tokyo is pretty hardcore when it comes to working hours and stress. And Copenhagen was kind of the same working hours, but the stress level was a bit higher. But again, I was in a different field. I was doing architecture rather than ArchViz.
Well, I think that architecture puts a little extra pressure on it because the money on the plate are way more. Talks about
exactly.
They are involved in millions, and archivists generally are thousands involved, and not so. And
exactly. I don't even understand like what was in let's say Bjarke's head when he was just getting like a 20-year-old from Romania leading a project that was worth like 300 million or something like that. It was just so, I mean, when it comes to this kind of a level of like this magnitude, is just like you would think that you want to have the most skilled people on board, but he was just like letting 20-year-olds fucking around.
Well, but I think that that shows you that people are people everywhere, and it doesn't matter how old are you, where you're from, you can do a good job. I was recently listening to, there is this series of shows called Architects Not Architecture, where groundbreaking architects give speeches about more their life than their work. And I heard the one of Dan Stubegaard from Kobe Architecture in Copenhagen, and he also started with Bjarke and Plot back in the days.
Yeah, exactly. And I met the guy once at the party, and then he was like Bjarke introduced me, saying that he's one of the nicest guys in the office and he's super talented. And then a few beers later, Dan was like, "Hey, if you ever get bored of BIG, you can always come join Kobe." What is the fun side story?
I met Bjarke once here in Frankfurt because he came to the opening of the I think Omni Tower they did here.
Yeah, exactly. And the shifted levels one. That's pretty cool.
And I got the opportunity to chat sometimes with his partner Kai Uwe Bergman, and also with some other guy, one of the partners, but I forgot. I think Pedersen was a Danish name.
Andreas Klock.
Andreas, exactly.
He's like one of the nicest guys alive.
Yeah,
he's one of our best clients and friends, actually.
Yeah, they're very, very nice, down to earth, all of them. And then I met Dan because I went to one exposition in Munich. I think it was beginning of 2019. I went to this exposition about construction, and I went there because he was giving a lecture together with one of the partners at MVRDV. And I had the opportunity to talk with him a little bit, and I have their book, Our Urban Living Room, and he was very cool because he wrote me like a wish on the book. But in his speech, he was saying that he left Big after a phone call. I don't know if it's literally a true story or he did it for the story, but he said that once they doing a pro competition, didn't have a really clear idea, and Bjarke called him and said, "We're gonna spell the name of the city with the letters VELLLE." Or Vel, something like that.
Weiler.
Is something like that, and he was like, "Yeah, I was a little bit tired of my boss calling with crazy ideas, so I decided I want to try on my own." And I wanted to know from you, because you have transitioned on your own. Do you have way more pleasure into working on your own, and does it feel like everything you do, every extra hour, every extra push you do, worth sort of more because you're more doing it for yourself? Or how do you see this part? Because nowadays we have this sort of admiration for entrepreneurship, and I'm curious to know from you if it feels way better to be working on your own company than rather in another's one company.
I don't think I had this hate towards working in a company or something like that. I think I felt somehow when I was, at least when I was in the beginning at Big, I felt that we're a bit of a crew, that we're a bit of a family. And then I have a feeling that even more so, I want to do that now, because I saw Big growing from 70 people to 500, and I think I would rather much want that we grow in some sort of a more cooperative way, that we just we don't end up having like discrepancies between like some people are just going to be scrapping the surface and some others just going to be getting like all the income. So I think it's nicer that we from very early on we start setting up these rules that okay, we work more in a cooperative way, and as we grow a bit, I think everybody should grow together.
I see. And I was curious to know what is your opinion about the current situation with the pandemics, if that has had any effect on your work, in a sense that...
Yeah, I mean, it did affect us a lot. We ended up just having so much more work than we used to. I think everybody was just sitting indoors and hoping that the world is going to get better, and just wanting to finish everything now, as if the world would end up tomorrow. And then they just dropped like so many projects on us. But I hope that it's going to relax a bit and people are going to realize that the world is not ending and we're going to be slowing down a bit.
That's really funny, because I would have think the opposite, that people would have put projects on a standby to think, okay, we have to evaluate if we're gonna do this project at all, and wait for it. But you say the opposite, which is really funny. But I mean, you have a different kind of architectural office as a client, so probably that's a little bit helpful.
Yeah, I almost have this fear that if we stop doing projects, like it's gonna be a really bad kind of like it's almost gonna sound like the end of the world, because imagine that we're working with like the biggest offices in the world, and once these guys are not gonna be doing projects, then I don't know who's gonna be doing projects.
Yeah, that's true. But I'm curious, and work-wise, have you switched something like? Have you worked remotely somehow to social distance at work, or how is the situation in Romania? Because I remember in summer was getting a little bit tougher, but now it's crazy everywhere. So did you get some precautionary measurements in the office, sending people working from home?
No, I think the government here was rather nice, so they didn't really impose that we all work from home, but we would be allowed to work as long as we have a kind of a paper from the firm saying that we are allowed to travel to work. So we kept the office open at all times, and I think that's kind of nice for social interaction and for humans in general, that they don't sit at home in pajamas and that they just pretend to work, but that we just like hang around and we work kind of together in a team. I think that's kind of the human nature a bit, that you want to be a social animal rather than be sitting alone.
Yeah, I'm really impressed of your philosophy of the family, the social, the doing things together. So I guess it must be very nice to work with you guys. And as you were saying, in every, even in your family, sometimes you might end up hating for a moment your dad, your mom, your brother, but then when things calms down, it's all good again. And so I think it's totally normal in any human relationship. It works like that. Um, but yeah, I'm really glad you accepted to participate on the podcast, and I'm really glad that finally I managed to speak with someone from that area. And you, man, are really cool guy and really kind and with really interesting point of views. I guess that this talk will be very inspirational for a lot of the listeners because of you have this sort of calm, positive vibe. So thank you very much. And before we conclude our conversation, if you want, you can shout out a little bit where people can find you online and your office and on social media, websites, and wherever.
Oh man, thanks so much for the really nice words. I really appreciate it. And thanks again for having me on board on the podcast. I think you're really doing a great job with this podcast and inviting people and maybe helping even the future generation, let's call them, to kind of understand how ArcViz works and how to develop and so. And yeah, I think we're on Instagram. I mean, I'm on Instagram. And as we speak, we're working on the website that's going to be www.bucharest.studio. But we are not up and running. We're going to be up and running in maybe less than 2 weeks, let's say. And yeah, let's keep in touch and let's keep up the good work.
Yeah, as soon as it's online, we're gonna be posting it on our Instagram page, which for now it's smaller than yours, but growing steadily. And also on the podcast, I'll announce it whenever it's online. And before we really conclude the talk, I want to remind the listeners that if they want to support the podcast, they follow our social media, which is Instagram at TCI Podcast. Then the groups, the pages on Facebook and LinkedIn, which are the Creative Insider. And from now on, to have a collection of the best of every podcast, they can go on the creativeinsider.com and subscribe our email list, our newsletter, and monthly they will receive the best quotes and the best topics we have discussed on this podcast. So thank you very much. Thank you, Lucian, one more time. And I hope to talk to you soon and maybe meet you in Bucharest very soon.
Thanks so much again for having me on board. I really appreciate it. So have a nice rest of the weekend and talk soon.
Yeah, bye-bye.
The whole world stops just like that. The whole world stops just like that. The whole world stops just like that.